Hello students! Today for our remote assignment we are going to be looking at the different levels of industrialization over different countries over a certain amount of time. We're going to do this by looking at a table. This is working on some of our skills that we need to improve upon this school year with our maps, graphs, and charts. So I found this wonderfully challenging table that's looking at the per capita levels of industrialization, and I thought that this would just be perfect to be able to go over those skills and our content about the Industrial Revolution and its spread. So from the previous video, you guys got the beautiful recap of my drawings about the origins of the Industrial Revolution. And this is looking at the per capita levels of industrialization. So my dear students, whenever we look at a table, chart, or graph, we always want to begin by looking at the title and trying to figure out what that's telling us. So per capita means by population. So this is looking at the level of industrialization in these countries based on divided by their population. And we're looking at this from the years 1750 to 1913. So almost a 200-year time span that we're looking at from the origins of the Industrial Revolution to its expansion over time. One of the other things that I want to go over with you before we get started into looking at some of these trends are where these countries are located. So Great Britain, Belgium, France, Germany, Austria-Hungary, Italy are all in Europe. The United States is obviously part of our new world, the Americas. Russia spans from Europe into Asia, and China and India are both in Asia. So when we look at our different places in the world, I just want to have that global context of geography as well, because geography matters. As we look at this data, we are going to look at three separate years here: 1750, 1860, and 1913. You guys are going to be taking notes with this. So again, just like you did with the last one, that you took a picture and submitted that picture as your evidence of learning for the day, you're going to be doing the same thing with this. So if you need to get out a sheet of loose leaf paper, get out a sheet of loose leaf paper. Otherwise, you will be able to take these notes. You can do it in a Google Doc and submit it as a Google Doc to me as well. I just need to know that you have done something to process this information that I'm giving you today as we go through this. So the first year that we are going to look at is 1750. And in 1750, I want to just compare when we look at the years of this data to see where the world is at in 1750 in terms of their levels of industrialization. So we've got the British with 10, Belgium 9, the United States 4, France 9, Germany 8, Austria-Hungary 7, Italy 8, Russia 6, China 8, and India 7. When you look at those years, I want to pull out if we have any outliers. Well, we do, right? The United States is the lowest here. Why are we the lowest in 1750? It's because we weren't even the United States yet in 1750. We were still the wee little bitty colonies of the British Empire. So that's why our number is so low. It's because of that system of mercantilism. We aren't industrializing. We aren't producing those goods for ourselves. They're going back to the British. So they're still taking our crops and our raw materials and processing it back home in their factories. But other than that, when we look at the level of industrialization for that year, we see that there isn't a whole lot of discrepancy, right? So our first trend number one that I want you guys to write down in your notes is that in 1750, the world is very even. No one country is very industrialized. So again, on your notes for loose leaf, you're writing down these three trends that we're going to be looking at in these notes. Trend number one, the world is even. No country is very industrialized. If we look at the next year then for trend number two, we're going to look at the year 1860. And in 1860, if we scroll down this year and look at these numbers, British are 64, Belgium 28, United States 21, France 20, Germany 15, Austria-Hungary 11, Italy 10, Russia 8, China 4, and India 3. We can see that the British have vastly surpassed the rest of the world, right? more than double the next runner-up. So our trend number 2 for these notes is that by 1860, the British have taken the lead. Great Britain has taken the lead. Western Europe, though, is also industrializing. So when you look at our Western countries, British, Belgium, France, Germany, these are all the countries that are going to begin to industrialize. So we're starting to see those trends happen, right? The British have taken the lead and Western Europe is industrializing. So that's the second trend that you need to write down on your loose leaf on your notes to submit to me. And then the third one, we're going to look at the year 1913. Now, a couple of things that I want to point out here about 1913. This is the cusp of World War I. So by the time that we're getting to our first World War I starts in 1914. This is what we're looking at for the terms of levels of industrialization. The British are pretty high up there. We've seen that they've grown even more, 115, Belgium 88, United States 126, France 59, Germany 85, Austria-Hungary 32, Italy 26, Russia 20, and China and India are still the lowest, 3 and 2. So the big first trend that we see here by 1913 is that the United States has surpassed the British, right? We are now the most industrialized country in the world. So the first part of trend number 3 is that the United States is the most industrialized. The United States is now number 1, the most industrialized. The British are obviously really high up there still. Other notable players that we see, I want to highlight for the trouble that they're about to cause in the 20th century. Germany here. Germany from 1880 to 1913 doubled and then added another increment in that same amount again. So they added they went from 25 to 52 and then added more than another 25 to get to 85. That rapid industrialization that we see in Germany has a lot to do with their militarization and the fact that they are preparing for war. They're getting ready for war. So we see, I just wanted to make note of that special figure there. When we look at this data across the years, though, a few of our outliers are China and India. Over time, we see that their numbers are decreasing. And that is definitely a humdinger. That's a head scratcher there. We're trying to figure out why are their numbers decreasing over time. It's not because their level of industrialization is decreasing. They're not like burning factories or throwing machines into the ocean or something like that. Remember, this is per capita levels of industrialization. So it's divided by the population. So what that means is that their population continues to increase. They have a growing population here, but their level of industrialization has stayed the same. Think about it as if we had a candy bar for our class. If we had one candy bar and it was just 2 of you that were in class that had to split it, you would both get a pretty big piece of the candy bar, right? But if everybody were back in person and we had to split that same candy bar amongst all 20 of us that were in class together, your piece of that candy bar just got a lot smaller. And that's what's happening here as we divide that candy bar, that level of industrialization, against a bigger and bigger population. That piece of that candy bar that they get is smaller. So the next part of trend number 3 is that China and India decrease over time because their level of industrialization stays the same, but their population increases. India's numbers are so low this whole time because they were a British colony. So again, that system of mercantilism, their raw materials are being shipped back to the British Empire, to Britain, and produced in factories in Britain. China was very isolationist during this time frame. They weren't trading with other countries. They were pretty shut off from the rest of the world because they were happy with their own resources and they were pretty self-sufficient. In terms of other losers in our trends here, we see that the Russians are consistently really low in terms of levels of industrialization, as well as the Chinese. So India has an excuse because, like us, the United States, when our numbers were that low, we were a colony. China and Russia, however, are just never really going to catch on to this game of industrialization, this game of capitalism, right? China won't start to make those reforms until the 1980s. So because they're so bad at industrialization, because they're so bad at the system of capitalism, they are going to reject capitalism and become communist in the 20th century. Russia's communist revolution is going to be brought on by its losses in World War I. And in the middle of that war, they are going to drop out and go through their communist revolution in the late 19-teens and early 1920s. Their revolution will turn into a civil war, and they will become a communist country in the 1920s. China is also going to have a civil war between the nationalists and the communists. And by the time we get to the end of World War II, China is going to become a communist country. So that's really what I wanted to point out to you for this trends chart. Again, your notes on this are your assignment to turn into me for today. So I want to see on loose leaf your trends that you wrote down here as I went through this, trend number 1, trend number 2, and trend number 3 as your quote exit slip to turn into me for this. I hope that you guys have a great rest of your day. If you have any questions about the content, let me know. Bye.